everyone. Welcome to the Elevate the Conversation podcast. I'm your host, Gina Donahue, and I am the owner and founder of Elevate Functional Medicine, located in Suwanee, Georgia. And as a functional medicine provider, a big part of what I do is develop integrative treatment plans for the people that I see. And I have with me today Rebecca Trussell, who is a yoga therapist and is somebody who I have worked with in the past to take care of my patients. So she offers a big part of the support component of an integrative treatment plan. So I would like to have Rebecca introduce herself and talk a little bit about what yoga therapy is and what she does.
Well, hi, I'm Rebecca Trussell, and I am a yoga therapist, also a yoga instructor. I am a Reiki practitioner, and I also help with instruction of meditation. I'm also a Thai yoga massage practitioner. That's not a huge part of what I do, but I do offer that modality as well. So I've been practicing in this area, teaching for over it's going on 15 years now, but yoga therapy is pretty new right now. So
what is yoga therapy? What does that mean?
Yoga therapy, and that's an interesting question. It's a very loaded question. Mm-hmm. Yoga therapy is a rather new modality of complementary alternative medicine. Mm-hmm. So it is something that is used very much alongside something else. So we work alongside traditional medicine, functional medicine. We work alongside physical therapists, counselors, psychotherapists, and it's a really wonderful modality for complementing what you're going through with someone else. It can stand alone for certain things, but for the most part, I find it works better when I see clients who are also working alongside someone else. Mm-hmm. So with functional medicine, I know there's more of the holistic approach than you're going to get when you just go to the doctor's office. Mm-hmm. And that works really well alongside the model that most yoga therapists practice under, is the one I practice under. And I can speak to that a little more too, mm-hmm. in detail. Mm-hmm.
So a big part of how I look at the body as a functional medicine provider is, our tagline is healing the whole person. And I often notice when I see people that there are a lot of underlying inflammatory issues that are playing a role in driving their chronic disease or driving their mood disorders or stress response. And what I see in my patients that I take care of is that really inflammation is one of the driving issues, and one of the deep-rooted causes of inflammation is really stress response. And so for me, when I think about who am I going to send to you, it's somebody who I feel like they really need support in that stress response. But not only that, it's deeper than that, because we know that we carry so much stress in our physical body. And so where I see yoga therapy as being a key part of helping my patients to improve their overall health is helping with that connection between stress and body, being able to recognize those physical cues of what's happening in your body with stress, and then feeling empowered to be able to move through that. So can you talk a little bit about how you address that, or how you see those issues?
Yes. So with yoga therapy, it's using a lot of the principles and practices and philosophy of yoga that you're not going to get in a yoga class often. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a lot of the teachers may learn it, but it's in the background. So I'm going to have to put my tea down because I have to talk with my hands. So the way I describe this to my clients typically is that it's called the Panchamaya Kosha model, mm-hmm. of looking at the individual. And that's a Sanskrit term. I don't usually use that term, but I break it down to, if you've ever seen those Russian dolls, mm-hmm. the Maryushka dolls, I think is they're called. So basically, yoga philosophy sees each individual as having 5 layers or sheaths. So we have our food body, which is, the body you can touch. You have your breath or energy body, which can be both your physical breath, and it can also be just like your level of energy, how's your sleep, that sort of thing. What kind of energy are you surrounding yourself with? So it gets a little into the woo-woo at this point. I like to tell people I'm grounded in science, but I like a healthy sprinkling of woo on top. So then after the breath model, and they're going from gross to subtle. So after the breath body, you have the mind body. So those are our thoughts, emotions, stress usually sits there a lot. And then you have what, it gets a little murky. Some people call it the wisdom body. So this is what I think of as the way of the part of you that is aware. So it's a lot about cultivating awareness, cultivating this ability to stand outside and observe what's going on and find that place of kind of neutrality. And then even deeper in is sometimes called your bliss body. I don't like to call it that because that I mean, what is bliss? You know, how can you find just absolute bliss? So some people call it your connection to God. I think of it more as the spirituality part of it, and I try to encourage people to connect to joy. So, and that's an interesting thing, because when you have someone come in with stress issues, 9 times out of 10, I ask them, what brings you joy? They can't answer the question. So all of these come into play when you're looking at somebody who's dealing with a stress response. And what I love about working with yoga therapy, both as being a practitioner and as someone who would work with a yoga therapist, is when I go to a yoga class or a yoga instruction, like there's a lot of popular stuff going around about the polyvagal theory and like, oh, this breath work is gonna you know, balance your vagus nerve, and this is gonna increase this, and it's like it depends on the individual. So I personally, when I first started doing yoga, I tend to have a lot of anxiety. I do not have a diagnosis of a general anxiety disorder, but I'm one of those people that was always tapping my foot. You can tell I talk a lot. I tend to be, you know, my thoughts are racing. So I went to a class and everybody's like, oh, restorative yoga, it's wonderful. You're just going to relax. Oh, it's going to be amazing. And the teacher put me into a pose and I thought I was going to die. Like I was just like, this is the worst experience in the world. So if we're looking at our sympathetic nervous system, my stress response went way up. And there's a lot, and I won't go into all the details, but there's a lot of stuff behind that of why it did. They put me in a posture where I was feeling enclosed. I'm very claustrophobic. I don't like to have like things binding me. And it was one of these like, we're going to help you relax. So they put me in a claustrophobic pose. And it was the worst experience of my life. And since then, I have come to be able to appreciate restorative yoga, but because every person is so individual, one thing is not necessarily going to address their stress response. Some people are going to find restorative yoga, some people are going to find a certain type of breath work, and it's that ability to sit and be led by the client. And they tell me, I liked this, I didn't like that. How does that make you feel? And we find the tools that work for them so that when they're in a moment of stress, they can access that tool in their life and go through it. So I have one client in particular that comes to mind who was sent to me mainly for anxiety. And when I was doing our intake paperwork and all this, she didn't tell me this verbally, but she wrote it down, that she was dealing with grief as well. And so we worked all that in, but she was saying, I want to travel. I get stressed when I travel. My anxiety's through the roof. I'm having a hard time being social. I've been to a therapist, I'm seeing therapists, she was had all this team of support behind her, but it was like in the moment, going through the TSA line, she didn't know what to do. So I gave her a simple practice that she could do standing there, that nobody's gonna know what she's doing, and you know, she sent me a text when it helped, you know, and that's the beauty of it, is being able to notice when your stress response is coming up and what are the tools you need to do to help meet yourself where you are.
Right. And what I think is really important to acknowledge or recognize is people don't come in to see me and say, I have an altered stress response.
Right.
Many of us are really disconnected from the thoughts that we're having and how they are manifesting physically. And it's that kind of connection is not really something that occupies our mind. And so what I think is so key to what you said is, first of all, the need for individualizing care, because I do see a lot of people who come in who you know, they're even in a functional medicine world, so many people have these programs or steps, and this is how we fix that. these are the functional medicine steps to fix that. And when you just start following steps, it doesn't matter if it's a functional approach or a conventional approach, it's still steps.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about, how we individualize care.
Yeah, and it's interesting about the steps because, I think they're helpful to have some steps to follow, but then being open to where it leads you. So it's not like when I see a client, I typically do muscle testing, or I talk to them a little bit, find out what they're there for. And then usually my steps when we start the process of evaluation is I do muscle testing, postural assessment, because I think people relate more to their body than anything else. If I can get them into awareness of the body, then it helps us go deeper into those more subtle layers that I was talking about. But then depending on what I find and depending on how the person responds to it, I'm not going to give the same plan of care to everybody, which typically, like if you go into, say you go see a physical therapist and you have something going on with your low back and they test your piriformis muscle and they give you piriformis syndrome, typically they're going to send you home with a sheet of exercises to perform.
Right.
But the thing about it is people don't do them the right way very often, depending on their lifestyle, depending on how they sit all day, what kind of posture they have, what kind of shoes they wear, what their behavior is, like do they run, do they walk, do they cycle? So all those things of like the habitual patterns have to be taken in just to know how to do an exercise the way it's going to target the actual area that you want to work. Does that make sense? So the plan of care is going to be different. And then when I take a person through a plan of care, and I'm just talking about the body right now, I'm going to have to ask them to give me a lot of feedback because I'm very client-led. So if somebody's like, I don't feel that there, I'm like, okay, we're going to do something else because that's not going to help you. And I think that's the beauty of yoga therapy. It's so client-led and you can curate it as long as somebody is giving you some feedback and answering the questions, you can really curate it to what they need. So it's not this overarching, this is going to help everybody with piriformis syndrome. It might not, know. And then once we get some of the physical assessment done, I typically take them through guided meditation. So the term is called yoga nidra for the things that I do, and that just basically means yoga sleep. And you can find these in yoga studios now. Like you can go to an hour-long class of yoga nidra, and it's basically just being guided through relaxation techniques. But it doesn't work for everyone. So I find the amount of time, the things that I'm going to talk about, maybe somebody needs more progressive muscle relaxation, maybe they need more visual. And so once I get to know a client a little bit more, I can know like this is helping them access that relaxation response. And then usually we talk about tools that they can do on their own. And I try to keep it like a 5 to 10 to 15 minute practice, hopefully daily, because if you send somebody home with an hour of things to do every day, they're not going to do it. They're not going to be able to fit it into their life. There's the rare person that can, but I want to make it doable so it starts those lifestyle changes, which is so much what you do with functional medicine. It's not just take this pill, right? It's let's try changing this behavior, add in this, shift this over. So that's what I think is one of the beauties of what I do alongside what you do, because it really supports that whole shift in kind of mindset, really.
What I see very often is that many people who come to see me everybody who comes to see me is very motivated in order to take control of their health and try and feel better. And a lot of what I see are people who feel invalidated, that their symptoms they're either normalized or not able to be treated. And so people come in with a really strong sense of motivation to be affirmed that they are not crazy, that they are having symptoms that can be diagnosed. But then beyond that, there is still this sort of disconnect between lifestyle changes or lifestyle and how that can throw people into hormone imbalance, and how stressors are carried in the body, and then that emotional sort of turmoil manifests physically and then can even lead to laboratory changes. We can actually see the effects of stress on organ systems. And so for me, trying to explain to people this really significant conversation that our mind has with our body and our body has with our mind, and then even trying to get people to understand how yoga therapy could help them, it really is sometimes this big jump.
Oh yeah.
For people to, whenever I tell people do deep breathing exercises, restorative practices, I shouldn't say whenever, very often I have people say, yeah, I tried meditation once. That does not work for me. I tried yoga once and it drove me crazy. And, inside, I just am saying, you need it more than anybody then. Like, you're exactly the person who needs this.
Yeah.
I don't say it quite like that to people, but how can you explain, what are words that you're able to use to sort of help people understand the need for this sort of biofeedback, or I don't know if that's the right term, this connection with the body and the mind, and what words can you use to explain to people how working through those physical manifestations of stress can then actually help relieve the stress itself? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. It's difficult. Like it's not an easy answer, but it does go into what I was talking about with the different layers of the body again. And so a lot of what I do is educating people. So a lot of the people that come to me initially, this is what I used to see, was mostly for musculoskeletal things, and I've moved more into the stress and anxiety and that sort of thing. But it's really interesting to start to help people understand that, like, low back pain, and there are medical studies on this, that low back pain, you can have a herniated disc and not feel it. And then someone else can have the same injury and be in debilitating pain. So there is a mind-body connection, and that is a huge part of what I educate people with, is like, how is your mind affecting your body? How is your mind affecting the energy levels? And then that goes into what you're talking about with, it can affect their labs, it can affect their hormone fluctuations. And I'm sticking with the low back because I feel like this is a really easy one to do, because so many people have low back pain in our society. And very often there's a feedback loop with low back pain, that it becomes more a mental issue than actually a physical. Like, maybe it started with a physical injury, hurt like crazy. And low back pain specifically, it often just goes out. Like, I bent down, I turned to get something out of the back seat and I threw my back out. Whereas, like, you hurt your knee, there's usually like you fell off your bike, so there was this incident. But so because the low back, there's been something kind of lurking there, and then you sneeze and you throw it out one day, there's this mind, set that starts to happen, and it may even be subconscious, like, I don't want to hurt my back again.
Yeah.
So there becomes this splinting, this protection, this tightening, and so that keeps you from moving, and that makes you more afraid, because the next time you hurt your back, it hurts more. And then you start to, so like, you may actually have a legitimate injury, but your mind starts to make it even worse.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I do is educating people, like, that the mind does play a role in what's going on in your physical body. One of my favorite professors in school has done a lot of study with pain, and this is a fascinating thing, is that pain does not have a center in your brain. Pain cannot really be measured. Like, we have those charts.
Yeah.
And the pain level is going to be so specific to you, based on your life experience, based on the people around you, your social situation, based on your belief system. based on like, and I'm not saying even good or bad food, based on what you ate, what do you do for a living, your stress levels. So like we could have the exact same thing going on in our body, and you could be at a like 3 out of 10 on the pain scale, and I could be needing morphine 9 out of 10, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this element of, can we reframe the pain experience? Can we educate ourselves? Can we cultivate that sense of awareness to notice what's going on, to cultivate a way to find composure and calm the body down? And usually when you're able to do that, you can see a lessening of the pain symptoms for a lot of people. So it's almost like with yoga therapy, you're really trying to help a person redefine what health and well-being means with whatever their diagnosis they've received, and how do they meet themselves where they're at so they can step into greater health and well-being, which is so much of what functional medicine does as well. It's like addressing those issues that get just like, no, just take a pill.
Right.
Nothing's wrong with you.
I think chronic pain is a really fascinating thing to talk about when it comes to the connection between the mind and the body. And it's one of the clearest examples, I think, of how we get into the blame game and often will accuse people, well, the pain, it's all in your head. You just have to change, you know, you just have to not think about it. You know, you just have to, it just is what it is. And it really isn't as bad as you're making it out to be. And, you know, we start victim blaming quite a bit. And there has been a lot of research that's been released over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, that people's experience of pain is exquisitely individualized.
Yes.
And just to, you know, further your point, you know, we have a lot of scientific evidence which shows that, you know, a paper cut on one person, I'm kind of making a joke, but, you know, a paper cut on one person could be completely like not even felt, and then another person, you know, their whole hand might be paralyzed. And it isn't, yes, it's in their brain, but it's not in their control.
Right. And I love that you're like, it's all in your head, and that's become a negative thing. It is in your head,
Right.
And you're legitimately in pain.
Right,
so why does that discount the situation? Like,
Right.
The brain is telling you something's wrong, and
Yes.
so I love re-educating people on that kind of thing.
Yes. So when I think about one of the more common issues that I see with people coming in, again, it's a lot of people come in with hormone imbalance, and they feel like their hormones are imbalanced. And so we'll do some testing and talk about, you know, lifestyle and stressors and sleep. And I also do a lot of education. And so a big driving factor for creating hormone imbalance really is the stress response. And everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people who are functional medicine literate are familiar with the term adrenal fatigue, which right now we're really reframing that and talking more about HPA axis dysfunction, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. It's just basically your hormone secreting organs, and how when we're under chronic physical or emotional stress, our body is really going to prioritize cortisol production because that's what keeps you functioning during the day.
Right.
And what's going to then take second seat is fertility. So sex hormones are going to be less important under our order of operations than cortisol. And so a lot of what I do is try to educate people about how stress creates hormone imbalance. So if we want to balance our hormones, yes, we can do some hormone therapy, but we really have to address the underlying cause of the hormone imbalance,
Right.
which is, again, regulating that physical stress response. We also have hormone resistance, you know, and we can have thyroid receptor resistance. So we have this whole sort of cascade of associated hormone issues, which are kind of thrown out of whack because of cortisol levels being either too high, so hypercortisol, which is where we initially go, and then hypocortisol, which is cortisol being too low. One of the most common side effects, aside from hormone imbalance, is weight gain. So I see a lot of people who come in who are having weight loss resistance, and they just don't understand because they say, I'm starving myself, I'm not eating very much, I'm working out really hard, and I can't lose weight. And now I've gotten to the point where after I work out really hard, I'm exhausted. I don't have energy to make it through the rest of the day. And so people are just feeling really stuck in this rut of weight gain, working out hard, starvation, and they're totally plateaued. And we know that when you're working out really hard and you're in a hyper or hypocortisol state, you're going to cause weight gain.
Right.
But trying to get somebody to get out of that thinking, it's supposed to be calories in, calories out. If you have a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight, period. Work out really hard, you're going to lose weight, period. But people aren't seeing that actually happen. So I, again, have this hard sell of restorative practices, calming strategies, deep breathing. We have to stop these heavy workouts and start restoring the body so it can eventually get to the point of feeling like it can let go of some calories. So how do you approach somebody, when you see them either in that hyper or hypocortisol state?
It's going to fall into, again, it's going to depend on the individual. So seeing how they, like what they're doing, if somebody's over exercising or not doing anything at all. But it's interesting with the how to relax, and you're talking about the deep breathing. One thing I see a lot with people is they don't know how to breathe. And then they're taught to deep breathe. So they do that belly breathing, and that is a crisis breathing. That is when you need to calm yourself down quickly. So if you're taking, a lot of us are overdoing the breathing. So if I can get people to learn how to make more subtle breathing and learn how to just breathe well overall. So what I educate with people with a lot with the breath is, we think about the front of the body all the time. So I'm breathing and my lungs are here, right? And so actually your lungs are wrapping around your body, as you know. So I try to work with people to notice, what is your body doing when you breathe? What is your body just doing when you breathe, normally? I don't tell them the right or wrong. Then I watch. And then when if I'm seeing a lot of belly breathing, I try to encourage them to think about their body as almost like a cylinder, and think about the movement out and in as you breathe. And where else do you feel it? So it's a slow process, because you might be coming up on 50 years of breathing with this fast breathing or super deep breathing when they think they need it to calm down. And so that's one thing I do. First off is look at people's breath. And it's amazing how much you can regulate the autonomic nervous system just by learning how to breathe well, or or just breathe efficiently. That's more what I'm looking for, is how do you breathe efficiently? And then the other thing is some people are going to need very restorative practices like you're talking about. For me, who had never done yoga before and got plopped into a restorative practice, wasn't so calming. But once you get to know somebody, most people are going to be able to find some calm, how to get to that relaxed state. So much more restorative practices, slower pace, linking movement with breath. Because a lot of what we see with people who are really trying to lose weight and work out, they're doing things like HIIT, they're doing things like running, CrossFit, with bad breathing.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people, I think HIIT is fine, but if you're doing that kind of workout and you're holding your breath the whole time, you're just shooting your nervous system through the roof, because it's I'm running from something. Your body doesn't know that there's nothing chasing you. It's just getting the cues from holding your breath and moving really fast. Something's after you, and we got to go. So those are usually what I do, is try to get people to slow down and see where we go from there. So it's really going to depend on the individual, but there are some typical practices, and they include usually restorative, how to breathe more efficiently, and then slow mindful movement, linking the breath with posture.
And I think, again, just from seeing people, so many people, I get a lot of resistance about what restorative means, what restoration means. And for me, you know, a restorative practice can be being in the kitchen, talking with my friend on the phone, and meal prepping for the day. And I know that I'm taking care of myself. I enjoy when I go into the kitchen, if I'm going to set aside time to cook and meal prep, I've like intentionally set aside that time. And for me, it's restorative because I'm relaxed, I'm enjoying my time, I'm not under stress, and it is actually a state of mind where I'm really focused on what I'm doing. And also just listening to music. Sometimes my best time in the kitchen is just listening to music and cooking or taking a walk outside.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's a lot of, we're in such a fast-paced, data-driven, results-driven state of mind right now. It's like we just don't have time to not be productive, accomplishing something.
Right.
You know? And so what I hope to be able to educate people on is that working with somebody like you, learning how to regulate your own body's your own body processes intentionally, that isn't a waste of time.
No.
And the results may not be immediate, but the results will be long lasting once you get there.
Yeah.
And that's really what is it all about. It's about having a body that's going to work for you and allow you to live the life that you want to live, right? Like nobody wants to be dealing with diabetes.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be dealing with hypertension or menopause or andropause or Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
Right? Like we don't want to be dealing with those things. So the more that we're able to slow down, make the connection with our body, put the work into our body, then the better our lives will be.
Yeah. And what you're describing so much is that connection to joy that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Is you find that thing that connects you to joy. And it doesn't have to be like a yoga practice or like some kind of work thing. It's whatever brings you joy. I had a client once that was dealing with severe depression. And I said, what brings you joy right now? And she was thinking, she's like, my dog. It's like, take your dog for a walk, 5 minutes a day, and just be with your dog. Leave your phone at home.
Right.
It's the best part of your dog's day. And like, just enjoy your dog. That can be your connection to joy. And that's just one step on that, like what you're describing, this embodied experience, and allowing ourselves to enjoy it. Like, nobody wants to be on a crash diet and like killing themselves for the rest of their life. What kind of life is that?
Right.
So
yeah, so really it's about increasing quality of life and
Yes.
recognizing, again, that self-care is health-care.
yes, very much.
That's what we're trying to get to. So, well, thanks a lot for
Thank
joining
you.
me today on
This was fun.
the Elevate the Conversation podcast. So I hope that was an interesting conversation for people to listen to. And I'd like to have you come back again and we'll talk more about some other subject in the future.
I'd love to. This was fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to all of our listeners for listening to our second podcast. And we hope you have a blessed day.